So it's the 30-year anniversary of the British Acupuncture Council next year, and I thought it would be nice to have a few conversations with different members of our community so we can all get to know each other. We can learn a bit about how we all got here and what we think. And I'm really pleased to be joined today with Cinzia Scorzon, who has been a prominent teacher in our profession for many years. And she's someone I have a huge amount of respect for, and I'm really excited to get to know a little bit about how she's developed as a practitioner and her philosophy of acupuncture, her influences, her insights in her teaching career. And so the place I wanted to get started with Cinzia is what were the really formative things that drew you into acupuncture and made you want to take it really seriously as a career?
Well, initially I trained in the Five Elements Worsley School from 1981 until 1984. And then after I graduated there, I also studied in what they were called the Journal of TCM seminars, where Giovanni Maciocia, Peter Deadman, Julian Scott and Vivian Brown taught. It was a postgraduate course at the time. And afterwards, actually, at the time when I started at the Worsley School, there were no books, absolutely no books. We just had a point book, that was edited by one of the teachers. So there was not much literature, I must say. But afterwards, so we were all starving for knowledge. So whoever came to the UK, to London particularly, to teach, we were trying to attend the courses because we needed to learn from someone. Because the Capture book, I think it came out in 1986. Yeah, so it did not even the web that has no weaver was available. So one of the person who started to come to London regularly from France, two people actually, not just one, were Father Lar and Elizabeth Rochard de la Vallée. And they were both sinologists, not practitioners, sinologists. And they were teaching the text, particularly the Neijing, a lot of the passages of the Subang, in particular, and examining the characters, and I found that incredibly interesting and fascinating. I really fell in love completely, with that. And from the clinical practice, instead, there was a Chinese doctor who left China at the time of the revolution and everything, and eventually emigrated to the United States, to New York, Dr. John Sheng, who was the teacher of Leon Hammer, the guy who wrote the Pulse book, and also that book about emotions, and the Shen diseases. And also I think Maciocia studied with him a little bit. And another guy, that the name came back to me, called Alain Papier, who I don't know what happened. He was a real, disciple of Dr. John Sheng. And John Sheng actually was brilliant in terms, of clinical expertise. So so at that point I thought, I really have to go to China at this point, And so after having worked for almost 14 years, there was this chance to do a master's degree in acupuncture with the college in York. That was, at the time when I did it, was recognized by the University of Wales. So I did my master with them, and that was my excuse to go to China for a year and 3/4 because of field work, because the topic of my research was how the first acupuncture textbook were compiled for the University of TCM in China. So I interviewed quite a number of doctors in Shanghai, where I lived at the time, in Nanjing and in Beijing. So I had a little bit of different, regional, if you like, information, because
Wow.
obviously different places, there are different rules. So I met, I am so glad because in Shanghai particularly, I met this old doctor, still considered like the treasure of the country, and Liding, Professor Liding, and Professor Liding was the compiler of the anatomical charts. So he went through pathological dissection to find out the point. And he described to me the whole thing, when I interviewed him. So it was a real privilege to talk to him.
These are the charts that we've come to know really well.
Yes.
He was the guy who...
He was the first one to compile this one, with all the muscle, tendons, bones, and that. He was the first person because they went through all, dissection of the bodies to try and find out, where the point was. It was, he told me that was ordered by the state. He had to do that job because they wanted to make, obviously, Chinese medicine as scientific as possible. Yeah. And he had to do it. But he said, yes, I had to do it, but this is, this was the time. You did what you had to do.
Yeah.
He accepted completely. I mean, this was this leading. He was the guy that when you went into his studio, at the university, he had one desk full of books and the other desk was totally empty with just the big paper to do calligraphy. Because he started when he was age 4 to do calligraphies because his dad was a famous calligrapher. So he had this calligraphy, they were beautiful things anyway. And he said that he continued for all his life to do this calligraphy because for him was his way, it was a Yangshan exercise, but it was the way, that his chi, he could actually treat people, by doing this. So he was obviously, growing chi, guarding his chi and using it for his patient, which I thought was amazing. It was absolutely amazing.
I had a Tai Chi teacher in Taiwan who was also a calligrapher, and it was the same principle. He just thought it was extensions of the same thing. Amazing.
Yeah. So that was one of the people that I encountered, and then I met another doctor. He was a medical doctor in Beijing. He actually was the one that introduced in China the ear acupuncture from Noguier. From the French. So I met him as well, nice guy as well. All these people, I thought, oh God, they will never talk to me because who am I? I'm these stupid foreigners, who could barely speak a little bit of Chinese. And these people, they were so nice and open and they spent with me, a couple of hours talking, etc. And then they let me sit with them in the clinic while they were treating patients. They invited me. I could go whenever I wanted to. So I felt really privileged.
I think this is so interesting because, and it's so wonderful that we have this actual human connection with history, because our medicine is not just written down in books, it's handed down. There are things that you can't communicate just in books, and it's something that I think is really important for our whole community and new students that are coming up to be connected and hearing your stories about meeting these really formative minds. And I think it's also interesting, I don't know what your thoughts are, but people have lots of different opinions about TCM, but it was designed by very great people, wasn't it? It was designed by very smart people.
Yes, but you know what? My investigation, my dissertation eventually came up with, because there were two, it was very interesting to interview people. The old school, so they were all past retirement age, but they were still working because they were so good, And then there was the middle ground, and then there were the young ones, So I interviewed all of them, all these teachers, And what I was told was the old ones, they train in the apprenticeship way. Yeah, so not in formal institution, educational institution. So they had their so each had their own masters, his own master, etc., etc. Then there was the middle one, that was Cultural Revolution time. So, you know, they never qualified even. And one of the guys that I interviewed, he never got the university degree because, you know, they stopped any kind of university degree, but it was still, you know, he could practice and all the rest of it. And then there were the young ones who qualified after. And the old one, they said, well, we compiled, you know, we had the textbook, we compiled the textbook, whatever. But what we taught in class, what we learned, the ones during the middle, they had the worse education. So it was very empirical, their teaching, you know, they were following these very basic textbooks, very, very minimalist textbook. And then the young ones, they were following the textbook. There was nothing of the apprenticeship, absolutely nothing. So it was completely different, the teaching, the information that these three different groups of people, of teachers gave to their students. You understand? So that's what I thought it was very interesting, because what came up is basically what we learn in the West, is what the youngest one, the younger, which is a very polished, constructed version of modern TCM that has got hardly anything to do with what the old ones taught. In China. So that was very, very interesting to do. So that was the time in China. And afterwards, the first time I came across the Japanese approach was with Stephen Birch, because he gave a seminar. And that was a little bit mind-blowing, because he started to talk about you don't need to get the chi, you don't have, you know, to do all that kind of stuff that you do, you know, this heavy-duty manipulation and blah, blah, blah. You don't have to use a lot of needles. You know, there was a completely different approach. And at the beginning I thought, what is he talking about, this guy? You know, why is he coming up with all this nonsense? You know? But then, actually, I started to use this kind of approach with some of my patients who were afraid of needles, who were very tense, very anxious, very, you know, and it really worked, because I was not hurting anybody, you know, it was really nice. And also with children, because Stephen also was teaching how to treat children without insertion. And I thought, oh, this is great, you know, and I started to look into the Japanese model, you know, the Japanese, and I must say, you know, I really liked it. At a certain point, there was the book translated by Stephen Brown, the Introduction to Meridian Therapy by Shudo Denmai. And that book, you know, there was in that book, I still tell my students to get hold of that book if they can, because there is a whole part on pulses, which is really, really good. And for beginners, it's fantastic. And but also his approach. He uses few needles, very few needles. He's very cueing in figuring out. I know, because I met him personally. I studied with him as well personally. He's cueing to figure out if the patient, you know, what's the problem, etc., etc. And he has got this capacity to make you really at ease. He is that kind of person, very generous teacher, very, very nice. So I really like their approach. But because I've got a very inquisitive nature, at a certain point I also wanted to explore what the Koreans do. So I went to Seoul, and I managed to get into the Kyunghee University Hospital.
Wow.
College University, that is a hospital in Seoul where they have no, not in Korea, traditional medicine and Western medicine under the same roof. This doesn't mean that they go, you know, it's a kind of marriage, but it's a bit of an arranged marriage, if you like, but patients have the choice. And what I spent quite a couple of weeks there with different doctors, very, again, incredibly nice, generous doctors. And I was really impressed with the inpatients who were there. They were sent immediately there within 2 or 3 days after stroke, ictus. And I saw some of the patients who were there for a month. You would never have said they had a stroke. They were walking, talking, doing everything, and they talked to me, I had an interpreter because I don't speak Korean, and they were telling me, how they were, and in fact, you wouldn't believe it, would you? They were so happy, with the treatment they received. It was amazing. So it was really nice. And they had all these different departments, and they were very eclectic because in the Shen disease, in China, nobody let me go on Shen diseases department, psychiatric ward, no way, nobody, even with one Shi, no, because I was a foreigner. Instead, the Koreans were very different, so they immediately decided, yeah, you can go, and the boss, the doctor, he even speaks English. So it was very nice, because he at a certain point, he took out this packet and said, do you have this? And I said, what is it? So he opened it up, and there were needles in essential oil of lavender. And he said the lavender is very important for my patient because it's very relaxing, and he was treating people with anxiety, behavior. And he said, yes, we use this.
That's almost like injecting essential oils or something, isn't it?
It was amazing, and then you would leave, the packet, you would put the content in a little bowl, and there was this fantastic smell, lavender. So, and then in another room, he had, the sad lamp for people who need, so they were using that. So they were pretty eclectic, with the kind of treatment. So that was a very interesting experience as well. And then I managed to get into the specialist doctor, the one of the 4 constitution, but he told me, the first constitution apply only to Korean people. You can't apply to Western people. So really?
So that's is that the constitutions that relate to the 6 divisions? Is that right?
But they only use 4 types.
Okay.
And I was very, this is a bit strange to hear this. But anyway, at the end, they gave to me, as a gift, they gave to me a book that was in English about this constitution according to the founder, of this, and it was okay, but I don't use it very much. So that was the story, but I continuously, this was done over years, but I have continuously also attended the seminar with Elizabeth and with Father La until he passed away. And I carried on, doing all sorts of CPDs and things like this. Also because, and then I started to teach, started to teach both in Berlin when I came back from China. Not in Berlin, sorry, in Munich, in Germany. And at the University of Westminster. So I was constantly teaching and working in my practice as well. So I always had these 2 jobs, if you like, but which I find very interesting because to teach you need to practice and vice versa. So
what was the Korean? Was there a Korean style that you learned? You said it was quite eclectic.
No. With the Korean, for me, it was more the kind of open-mindedness that they had, and say, yes, there are all sorts of things that can be used out there. There isn't just needles and moxa, there are all sorts of things you can use, and you can use them in a very positive way. And then there was the thing of working together with the Western medicine, the biomedicine. So it was, if you like, at the beginning I was not opposed, but I was like this with conventional medicine, yeah. Also because it wasn't as sophisticated as now. Yeah, I remember that when I was working, for instance, when people, they didn't have the keyhole surgery for back problem. I have seen some of the scars, you know, covering about, you know,
Yeah.
half of the back and things like this. So it was almost butcher work. And the same with knee operation and things like this, or other surgery. I saw a woman, you know, who had a cesarean, and they did a cut, you know, that was from one hip to the
Wow.
other. You know, there were things that were. So I was like this, and then it really changed my relationship, if you like, with biomedicine, particularly with I came across afterwards quite a number of doctors who were very sympathetic to acupuncture. It was strange because at the beginning, I even had patients who came to me and said, you know, my doctor told me that if I carry on having acupuncture, they will strike me off their books.
Wow.
Yeah. So there was quite a lot of hostility, and then afterwards instead things were different. So I changed, they changed, yeah. And afterwards I worked with doctors, so you know that was not a problem. So I must say the Korean helped me with that, but it's not that they have brought an awful lot of more, you know, knowledge or even technique-wise. I prefer Japanese. With the Japanese, yes, there was more learning at that level. So, and then I studied Kampo, and then I did the Chinese herbal master at the university at CPD. So there have been continuous studying and engagement. I mean, it's something that I will carry on until I die, I think, because it's so interesting and I'm passionate about.
So you then taught at Westminster for quite a stint?
Over 20 years.
20 years.
Yeah, until they closed the course.
And maybe you could tell us some of your insights and things that you've learned over the years of teaching.
Well,
acupuncture.
I've just been to Taiwan at there was a huge conference of IASM, which is, you know, a conference that happens every 2 years, and it brings together scholars and practitioners from all over the world interested in East Asian medicine. And well, I talked about my reflection of teaching in the West, basically. I always taught acupuncture. And one of the things that is very difficult as a teacher is to get the student out of thinking in biomedicine terms. They still think of diseases and not of people suffering from XY condition. And even if they have the same condition, they experience it in totally different way. And you have to treat it differently. No, they just say, oh yes, that woman is suffering from endometriosis. What are the points for endometriosis? That guy has got stomach ulcer. What are the points for stomach ulcer? And it's very difficult to get this kind of change in their head, that they are treating a person suffering from something and not a disease. So that is a cultural issue, if you like. Yeah. So that is a very big thing that students, it's difficult to drum it into the students. Yeah, it takes a long time. The other issue is obviously, you know, they don't know if it works. They don't know until they start, you know, seeing patients. So if people don't get better, immediately they say, oh, I did something wrong. It's my fault. They don't appreciate that, first of all, you know, acupuncture is not quick. It's not a quick fix. So, it takes time because it deals with the core, with the root of the disease. If somebody's been ill for 20 years, they can't expect in 1 or 2 treatments that the person, gets better. So that is another big thing, the frustration, if you like, or and the kind of feeling insecure, of not knowing enough, or not being able to diagnose properly, or not using the right point combination. There are all these issues that come up. And then, of course, the other big issue for me are the textbooks. Because the textbooks are compiled by practitioners. So they present Chinese medicine in a very unilateral way, because they're not historians.
Right. Yeah.
So they present it as a linear tradition over 2,000 years old. So all the richness, all the differences, all the kind of discussions that have been going on in the Chinese medicine world over millennia it doesn't come up. And I even, that was so, because I introduced a lecture at the University of Westminster about the history of Chinese medicine. Yeah, because I think it's important. It was just one lecture, but at least, And when I said to the student, oh, by the way, what you learn is contemporary TCM, I had 2 students, they were almost burst into tears. I said, oh, no, it's not possible. Are we not studying this? The 2,000-old traditions, and no, you're studying what they decided, to teach after the communist China, after they I know because I actually did a research on it, and they were so disappointed. But and why? Because the textbooks, they present this. As if, whatever is written in these textbooks was written 2,000 years ago, which is a big fake news, big lie. Yeah? So there was also, this is a big problem in my opinion, because everything should be contextualized. Yeah? And the changes, all this should be clearly explained to students. They should appreciate this because the changes over the different dynasties are very important, because the emphasis just on qi. From wind it becomes water, from water it becomes fire. So it's very important to understand these changes and why they happen. So, but this is something, if it's something to do to improve the education.
Well, when I was studying herbs at Westminster, actually at the same time that you were doing the course, although you had studied Campo years before, something I really appreciated was the conference that you put on, the East Medicine Summer School.
Oh yes, the summer school. Yeah.
And it feels like that was something you were doing to try and address exactly that issue, wasn't it?
Yes.
Maybe you can tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I've done that single-handed for 5 years. I organized the first 2 were 2 weeks, and then afterward the university only allowed me to do 1 week, and also it was too much for me to organize 2 weeks of lecture, where there were scholars, researchers, sinologists, historians of medicine. There were practitioners as well, very, very, very experienced practitioners, specialized also in particular, conditions, and every year changed the subject. Yeah, and there were these different lectures every day. The people didn't have to stay for all the lectures. They could pick and choose. So there were practical sessions where people could do acupuncture for pain, say, then or for fertility or whatever. And then there were historians that they were going through text where they were discussing these diseases and its treatment strategy and all the rest of it. And the anthropologists that they were introducing, what was going on, etc., etc. Which, it was very interesting, and again, it was a very nice experience because it brought this kind of really highly academic world with the practitioner world together.
It was completely unique. I mean,
Yeah.
I've had the fortune to go to a number of them, and
Yeah.
there was one highlight I remember where you had Dr. Ili Wu, who's
Yeah,
a
Dr. Ili Wu.
brilliant Chinese medicine historian, not a practitioner, historian, but brilliant historian.
Yeah.
And she was lecturing on, she's got a specialism in blood, all kinds of different
That's right.
approaches to blood, whether it's from a gynecology or trauma.
Yeah.
And I think the title was A History of Blood in Chinese medicine.
Yeah, because she published the book afterwards.
And she was talking about these, from her point of view, or classical ancient techniques for wound healing, where they would have semi-open casts, where you could apply the lineaments daily, because they were semi-open and they were mobile. But also speaking at that conference was a practitioner called Carl Zapelius,
Yes.
who had actually been to a present-day trauma clinic to train in Western China in Sichuan province.
Yeah.
And they were actually using that technique.
Yes.
And
precisely.
it was just incredible, that there was this kind of light bulb moment where you get the something which has come from a academic and history direction, and then someone else in the room saying, no, this is actually what I've been using, and recovering those techniques. So I think that the value of being able to extend across disciplines, extend across from practice to academia and back again, it's invaluable.
I thought, that was very good. And also topics that are a bit obscure, like the Ming Men fire, were discussed with an historian, with Leslie Debrier from Belgium, So there were all sorts of different things that we brought up in those summer schools. But, it was a little bit disappointed that there were participants, but not as much interest that I thought it would have somehow.
Well, maybe if it had a chance to continue, it might have grown.
Yes, I know.
In that way, but maybe to finish, I just wonder if you have any particular advice for any students or new practitioners that might be watching of how to develop their career in acupuncture, because it can be a bit bewildering with the level of choice and the possibilities. Yeah.
Well, one advice is, first of all, be persistent. Don't get discouraged. Be persistent. Continue no matter what. And do a lot of things with your hands, a lot of palpations. Try to develop your palpatory skill as much as you can. So put your hand, feel the meridian, feel the pulses, feel the abdomen, feel, the texture. Just really use your hands. Points, learn the points, not just in terms, the usual pericardium 6, spleen 6, stomach 36. Learn the point, because choosing the right point makes a hell of a difference. The more accurate you are, the best the result. So don't just learn a few points. And the other thing, just study with different teachers. Don't stick with one. Nobody is perfect. I always told my students, go and study with this, with that, with the other, please try. Because I found that it was very beneficial to study with different doctors in China, in Japan, Korea, in England, in the different places. I went to America, to Australia as well, and I attended lectures by different people. You can learn something from anybody. And then, when you have learned, then you can use what you decide it's you. So you don't have to copy somebody else. You develop your own style, but you do need to explore a little bit what is out there. And then, you assimilate, and then you develop yourself as a practitioner. And I think also try not to just sit on the modern TCM. Just look at other approaches as well. The Japanese meridian therapy is one, but there are other possibilities as well. because I think the more tools you have in your box, the more you can help people, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Well, thank you so much, Cinzia.
You're welcome.
You know, you've been a great inspiration to me, and I'm really glad that some other maybe newer members and practitioners can benefit from hearing your voice and from your experience. So,
I hope they understand me.
Yeah.
Anyway, thank you for
above all the
inviting.
crickets.
Yeah, thank you for inviting
Thank
me,
you, Cinzia.
and good luck to everybody.
Great. Thank you.